I am Liam Vance. I am 32 years old. 2 years ago, on the exact night of my birthday, my mother looked across a crowded, expensive restaurant table and whispered a command to my older brother that was designed to completely destroy my life and take my 5-year-old daughter away from me. In the middle of a dinner I was paying for, while I was literally slicing my own chocolate birthday cake, my parents coldly instructed my brother to leave the restaurant, drive across town, and break into my home. They wanted him to change the locks. They wanted to throw me out onto the street and lock me out of the safe haven I had spent years building for my little girl. They sat there smiling at me, drinking overpriced wine, knowing they were executing a plan to ruin me. But there was one massive thing they did not know. They did not know that I had already found the hidden offshore bank accounts. They did not know I had found the forged commercial real estate deeds. They did not know I had uncovered the massive, multi-million-dollar paper trail of tax fraud they had built using my stolen identity. And today, the woman who thought she could treat me like a disposable pawn is serving a 5-year federal probation sentence, completely stripped of her social standing, and legally banned by a judge from ever coming within 500 feet of my daughter or me. Before I tell you exactly what happened that night and how I brought a corrupt family empire to its absolute knees, please hit that like button if you believe in karmic justice. And do not forget to let me know exactly where in the world you are watching from in the comments section down below. Now, let us go back to the exact moment the masks finally slipped and the war began. The restaurant was incredibly loud. It was a high-end, pretentiously dark steakhouse in the center of downtown Seattle. It was the kind of establishment my mother, Victoria, absolutely insisted on visiting because being seen by the right people was the only currency she truly valued in this world. The air smelled of roasted garlic, expensive cigars from the patio, and the heavy perfume of wealthy people pretending to be perfectly happy. It was my 32nd birthday. I did not want to be there. I wanted to be back in my modest apartment, eating a cheap pepperoni pizza and watching cartoons with my daughter, Lily. But in the Vance family, your attendance at these formal dinners was never a request. It was a mandatory summons from the matriarch. My father, Richard, sat at the head of the heavy oak table. He was swirling a glass of very expensive bourbon, completely detached from the conversation, as usual. My older brother, Julian, sat directly across from me. Julian was 35 years old. He was the absolute golden child of the Vance family dynasty. He drove a leased Porsche that I highly suspected he could not actually afford. He wore watches that cost more than my annual salary, and he enthusiastically agreed with every single word that ever fell out of my mother's mouth. Lily was sitting right next to me in a high chair. She was happily drawing on the thick paper tablecloth with a blue crayon, completely oblivious to the toxic, heavy air pressing down on our section of the restaurant. I loved her more than breathing. I worked 60 hours a week as a mid-level architect just to ensure her college fund was growing and our bills were paid. The waiter brought out the cake. I had ordered it myself, and I was paying the entire bill for this dinner because my parents firmly believed that paying for your own birthday dinner built character. I picked up the heavy silver cake knife. I was reaching across the table to slice the first piece. The restaurant was noisy, filled with the clinking of glasses and loud laughter from a nearby corporate party. But it was not noisy enough to hide what happened next. My mother leaned slightly to her left, bringing her face close to Julian. Her perfectly manicured hand shielded her mouth, but her voice carried that sharp, unmistakable commanding edge it always had. She whispered, "While everyone is here, go change his locks." My hand instantly froze on the handle of the knife. The silver blade hovered exactly 1 inch above the dark chocolate frosting. I stopped breathing. I stared at the dark brown icing, my mind violently spinning. My father did not even blink. He did not look surprised. He just took a slow, deliberate sip of his amber bourbon, set the heavy crystal glass down on the table, and nodded at my brother. "Do it now, Julian," my father said, his voice completely flat. "Before dessert is over." Julian wiped his mouth with a crisp white linen napkin. He stood up from his chair. He did not look at me. He did not say a single word. He reached into his tailored suit jacket, grabbed his car keys, turned his back on the table, and walked right out the front glass doors of the restaurant. My heart started hammering against my ribs so violently I thought it was going to crack my chest wide open. My mouth went completely dry. I did not say a word. I could not speak. The sheer audacity, the cold-blooded calculation of it all, left me entirely paralyzed. I just forced a fake, strained smile for my daughter, handed her a small slice of cake on a porcelain plate, and sat there in the most agonizing, deafening silence of my entire life. Why would my own mother send my brother to change the locks on my apartment? I paid my own rent on time every single month. I worked hard. I was a single father just trying to keep my head above water. I was not a rebellious teenager sneaking out after curfew. I was a fully grown man. The hour that followed was pure psychological torture. It was a masterclass in manipulation. My mother sat there and casually made small talk about her ridiculous country club HOA meetings. She complained about the caterers for the upcoming charity gala season. She sipped her red wine and smiled at the waiter as if she had not just orchestrated a targeted break-in at her own son's home. I watched the antique clock on the restaurant wall tick forward. Every single second felt like a heavy stone dragging me underwater. My stomach was twisting into tight knots. Then the heavy glass doors of the restaurant swung open. Julian walked back inside. I knew something was catastrophically wrong the absolute second I saw him. Julian always walked with this arrogant, chest-out, confident strut. He walked like he owned every room he entered. But right now, he was practically dragging his feet across the expensive hardwood floor. His face was completely drained of all color. He looked sick. He looked terrified. He walked slowly over to our table. He completely ignored his untouched slice of cake. He leaned down, placing his hands on the table to steady himself, and whispered in a raw, trembling voice, "Mom, there is police tape all over his door. Cops are everywhere." My mother's perfectly powdered, unbothered face suddenly tightened into a mask of genuine horror. Her eyes darted directly to me, flashing with wild, unfiltered panic. Every single fork at the table stopped moving. The air in our little section of the restaurant went freezing cold. The ambient noise of the steakhouse seemed to fade into a dull, distant ringing in my ears. Before she could even open her mouth to spin a lie or try to control the narrative, my cell phone buzzed violently in my suit pocket. I pulled it out. The bright screen lit up the shadows under the table. It was a text message from an unknown Seattle area code. "Mr. Vance, this is Detective Miller with the Seattle Police Department. Please contact me immediately regarding your apartment unit 3B. We have a serious situation." My mother wanted to lock me out of my own life. Instead, she had just unlocked the absolute, undeniable truth. I did not scream at her. I did not flip the heavy table over. I did not demand answers in front of the wealthy patrons. I just calmly stood up. I picked up my daughter's pink rain jacket and gently helped her put it on her small arms. "Where are you going?" my mother snapped, her voice suddenly high, tight, and dripping with desperation. "Sit down right now, Liam. We are not finished here." I did not say goodbye to any of them. I did not even look at her face. I picked up my little girl, held her tight against my chest, turned my back on the people who were supposed to be my family, and walked straight out the door. The cold, bitter Seattle rain hit my face the second I stepped outside onto the pavement, but I did not feel the cold. All I felt was the vibrating phone in my hand, and a deep, terrifying realization that my life as I knew it was permanently over. I thought the worst was behind me. I was so incredibly wrong. The drive back to my neighborhood felt like I was moving through a dark, suffocating nightmare underwater. The rain was coming down in heavy, relentless sheets. The windshield wipers were slapping back and forth across the glass in a frantic rhythm that perfectly matched my racing heart. Thwack, thwack, thwack. I gripped the cold leather steering wheel until my knuckles turned completely white. Lily was fast asleep in her car seat in the back. The soft, steady rhythm of her breathing the only thing tethering me to reality and keeping me from completely losing my mind. "Go change his locks." The words echoed in my head, bouncing off the glass of the windows, mocking me in the dark car. Why? What could possibly possess a mother to do that to her own son? But as the streetlights blurred past me in the rain, the cold, hard truth started to settle deep into my bones. This behavior was not actually out of character for Victoria Vance. This was exactly who she was. Absolute control was her oxygen. Our family was not a family. It was a ruthless corporation, and my mother was the undefeated CEO. Appearance, wealth, and social status were the only metrics she used to measure human worth. Julian had always played the corporate family game perfectly. He went to the right Ivy League college, he joined the right exclusive fraternities, and he accepted a highly paid position at my father's investment firm. He was the golden child. He was the heir apparent. I was the constant disappointment. I chose to study architecture at a state university. I wanted to build tangible things, not manipulate abstract money on a stock ticker. I wanted a quiet, honest life. I wanted to earn my own salary and pay my own way. That deep desire for an honest life had cost me dearly. It was the exact reason my marriage to Sarah fell completely apart. Sarah was a good woman, but she was not strong enough to withstand the Category 5 hurricane that was my mother. Victoria constantly and viciously belittled Sarah because she came from a working-class family in Ohio. My mother whispered pure poison into Sarah's ear at every holiday gathering. She suggested I was eventually going to abandon her. She subtly manipulated our finances, offering gifts with massive strings attached, constantly making Sarah feel like she was never going to be good enough for the elevated Vance family standard. When the divorce finally happened 3 years ago, my mother actually smiled at the courthouse. I saw it, a brief, satisfied smirk. She thought she had won. She thought she had successfully cleared the board of a bad investment. The subsequent custody battle was brutal, but the only good thing that came out of that entire nightmare was my full, legal custody of Lily. Sarah, entirely overwhelmed, manipulated, and broken by my family's relentless pressure, eventually walked away to start over in another state, leaving me to protect our daughter alone. And now my mother was coming for my apartment. She was coming for my safe space. As I sat trapped at a long red light, watching the red glow bleed into the wet, black pavement, my mind raced back to a sunny Tuesday afternoon exactly 1 month ago. That was the day the first major crack in the foundation appeared. That was the day I found the box. I had been at my parents' massive, sprawling estate in the wealthy suburbs. Victoria had aggressively demanded I bring Lily over for a photo op. She needed new, smiling pictures to post on her social media to show her country club friends what a deeply devoted and loving grandmother she was. While Lily was playing in the manicured, fenced-in backyard under the supervision of the housekeeper, I went up to the hot, heavily dust-filled attic to look for an old set of wooden building blocks I used to play with as a kid. I wanted to bring them home for Lily. The attic smelled strongly of dry cedar and old, forgotten secrets. As I was dragging a heavy plastic storage bin across the floor, I accidentally knocked over a tall stack of cardboard banker's boxes tucked away in the darkest, furthest corner near the eaves. One of the lids popped off, spilling several thick manila folders across the dusty wooden floorboards. I knelt down to gather them up, annoyed at the mess I had made. But as my hand brushed against the top folder, my breath caught in my throat. Printed across the tab in bold, stark black ink was Liam Vance Property Trust and Offshore Allocations. I did not have a property trust. I definitely did not have offshore allocations. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment. I drove a 5-year-old sedan. I contributed faithfully to a standard 401k plan provided by my architecture firm. I was meticulously saving up for Lily's college fund dollar by dollar, cutting coupons to make it work. My hands started to shake uncontrollably. I opened the thick folder. The first page was a legally binding deed to a $3 million commercial real estate property located in downtown Portland. The primary owner listed on the official document was me, Liam Vance. I flipped rapidly to the next page. It was a stack of bank statements from a private financial institution in the Cayman Islands. The current balance read $1.2 million. The account holder, Liam Vance. But it was the signature at the very bottom of the incorporation documents that made my blood run completely cold. It was my name, signed in sharp blue ink. But it was not my handwriting. It was a flawless, highly practiced forgery. And I knew exactly who had written it. The sharp, aggressive loops on the letter L and the harsh, downward slash on the V were entirely unmistakable. It was my father's handwriting. I sat there on the hard attic floor, watching the dust motes dance in the single shaft of sunlight cutting through the small window. I felt like the floor had completely dropped out from under me. I was falling into a black hole. My parents were using my identity. They were hiding millions of dollars in untaxed income, using my name and my social security number as a human shield against the government. If the IRS or the federal authorities ever audited this estate and found this paperwork, I would be the one going to federal prison for tax evasion and fraud. I would be the one losing custody of my daughter to the state. They had turned me into an unwitting, silent accomplice to massive, systemic financial crimes. Panicked, I did not know what to do. I did not want to confront them without a lawyer, but I could not afford the kind of lawyer who could fight Richard Vance. So, I pulled out my smartphone and I took high-resolution pictures of every single page. The deeds, the bank statements, the forged signatures, the wire transfer logs. I captured it all. Then, I carefully placed everything back into the folder, put the folder into the box, put the lid securely back on, and shoved it deep into the shadows exactly where I found it. I went back downstairs, forced a smile for my mother's camera, took my daughter, and left. I had not said a single word to anyone for an entire month, desperately trying to figure out my next move. And now, my apartment was wrapped in yellow police tape. Suddenly, a sickening, terrifying realization hit me like a physical punch to the gut. It hit me so hard I actually gasped out loud in the empty car. Greg. Greg was the older, retired guy who lived in apartment 3A, right across the narrow hallway from me. He was always so incredibly friendly, always bringing over fresh baked cookies for Lily, always asking about my day at the firm, always wanting to chat. But lately, in the last 3 weeks, his casual questions had become incredibly specific and probing. What exact time are you taking Lily to school tomorrow? Liam? Are you going to be out late for your birthday dinner tonight? Leaving the apartment empty for a few hours? Huh? I had thought he was just a lonely, harmless, nosy neighbor looking for conversation. I was so impossibly stupid. Victoria did not just guess that my apartment would be empty tonight. She knew. She had a spy planted right outside my door. She had paid the friendly old man across the hall to systematically monitor my movements. She knew I had found the box in the attic. I did not know exactly how she found out. Maybe she noticed the dust on the boxes was disturbed, maybe my father reviewed the files, but she knew. And she was making her aggressive move to destroy the evidence before I could blow the whistle. I pressed my foot down hard on the gas pedal. The car engine roared as I sped down the wet, dark avenue. The paralyzing fear that had been gripping my chest suddenly burned away, replaced by a deep, dark, terrifying anger. They were not just trying to control me anymore. They were actively trying to frame me. They were trying to ruin me. They were willing to break into my home to protect their dirty money. I pulled aggressively onto my street, and the flashing red and blue lights of 3 parked police cruisers painted the wet brick walls of my building. The rain was catching the light, making it look like the entire street was bleeding. This was it. The silent war had officially gone loud. I parked the car half a block away, sliding aggressively against the curb, not even bothering to pull perfectly into the spot. I threw the car into park and leaped out into the freezing rain. I unbuckled Lily from her car seat, lifting her gently, and wrapped her completely inside my large, heavy waterproof winter coat so the rain would not touch her. I did not want her to see the flashing police cars. I did not want her to see the bright yellow crime scene tape. I needed to protect her innocence for as long as possible. I carried her quickly around the dark back alley to the adjacent coffee shop where my best friend, Chloe, worked the late closing shift. Chloe was wiping down the espresso machine when I banged on the glass door. She took one look at my pale, dripping face, immediately wiped her hands on her apron, unlocked the door and reached out for Lily. Take her into the back break room, I told Chloe, my voice tight and breathless. Lock the heavy metal door from the inside. Do not let anyone in except me. Please, Chloe. I mean it. Chloe did not ask a single question. She saw the absolute terror in my eyes. She just nodded firmly, pulled Lily into her arms, and carried her straight to the back room. That is exactly what real, unfiltered loyalty looks like. I turned around and ran through the pouring rain back to the front entrance of my building. The heavy glass lobby doors were propped wide open. A uniformed police officer stopped me at the bottom of the stairs, holding his hand out, but another man in a cheap, wrinkled gray suit stepped forward from the shadows. He held up a gold detective's badge. Liam Vance? I am Detective Miller, Financial Crimes and Burglary Unit. We texted you. What happened to my home? I demanded, my chest heaving up and down, rain dripping from my hair into my eyes. My brother came here. Julian Vance. Is he inside? Miller shook his head, gesturing for me to follow him up the stairs. Your brother arrived about 45 minutes ago, saw the damaged door, and immediately called 911. We took his statement and sent him home. He did not do this, Mr. Vance. The break-in happened long before he got here. The neighbor in Unit 3A called in a loud noise complaint 30 minutes before your brother even showed up. Greg. Of course Greg called it in. The loyal spy had to call the police to establish an alibi and cover his own tracks. He probably watched the whole thing happen through his peephole. We reached the third-floor landing. My apartment door, Unit 3B, was hanging violently off its hinges. The heavy wooden frame surrounding the deadbolt was completely and utterly splintered. Huge, jagged chunks of painted wood were littering the cheap hallway carpet. Whoever did this did not care about being stealthy. They did not pick the lock. They used a heavy steel crowbar and sheer brute force to shatter the entrance. Do not touch anything, Miller warned sharply as we stepped carefully inside the apartment. Forensics just finished dusting the outer frame. I expected my entire apartment to be completely trashed. I expected the flat-screen television to be gone, the laptop missing from the desk, the kitchen drawers pulled out and dumped on the floor. But the living room was perfectly, eerily untouched. The TV was still mounted. My expensive architectural drafting tablet was sitting right on the center of the coffee table, untouched. It was not a standard robbery, Miller said quietly, watching my face closely for a reaction. They did not care about your electronics. They headed straight for the back rooms. I walked slowly down the short, dark hallway toward my bedroom. My boots crunched on the wood splinters. The door to my bedroom had suffered the exact same brutal fate as the front door. Kicked violently open, the internal lock completely shattered. I stepped inside the room, and the breath completely and instantly left my lungs. My bedroom had been aggressively searched, but not frantically. It was methodical. My closet doors were pushed wide open. My hanging clothes shifted aggressively to the side. The drawers of my nightstand were pulled out. But that was not what made my stomach violently turn over. On top of my tall wooden dresser, I had exactly 5 framed photographs of Lily. Lily smiling at the local park. Lily holding her backpack on her first day of preschool. Lily wearing a ridiculous plastic princess tiara we bought at Walmart. Every single photograph had been deliberately picked up and turned face down against the wood. It was not a search. It was a vicious, highly personal message. It was a direct, psychological violation of the one thing in this universe I loved more than life itself. They were telling me that my daughter was not safe. They were showing me they could touch the things I loved whenever they wanted. They did not take any valuables, cash, or jewelry, Miller said, snapping on a pair of tight blue latex gloves. But they left something behind for you to find. He pointed to the direct center of my perfectly made bed. Sitting right on top of the dark blue comforter was a plain, stark white envelope. It was not sealed. We have already photographed it and documented its position, Miller said. Take a close look. Tell me if the message means anything to you. I reached out with a trembling right hand and carefully pulled the single piece of white printer paper from the unsealed envelope. It was typed in a basic, standard computer font. Just one single sentence printed dead center. Tell your mother the truth always finds its way home. I read the chilling words 3 times. The black letters started to blur together. Tell your mother. This was not a random burglar looking to pawn a television. This was someone who personally knew Victoria Vance. This was someone actively trying to leverage her dark secrets against her. Mr. Vance, Miller's voice dropped, becoming incredibly serious and strictly professional. 20 minutes ago, a patrol car on perimeter check picked up a man 2 blocks from here. He was soaking wet, walking fast, and carrying a heavy canvas backpack. Inside the backpack was a large steel crowbar with blue paint chips on it that match your front door. His name is Silas. He is a known, violent contractor for some very shady people in this city. He has a rap sheet a mile long for breaking and entering, extortion, and assault. I stared at the detective, the pieces snapping together. Did my mother hire him? Miller did not blink. His expression remained hard. Silas is sitting in an interrogation room right now, and he is not talking yet. But we pulled an emergency preliminary warrant on his bank accounts while you were driving here. 2 days ago, a wire transfer of exactly $5,000 cleared into Silas's primary checking account. The origin of the transfer was a shell company based out of Delaware. But the authorizing signature on the digital wire order. Miller paused, letting the heavy, suffocating silence hang in the ruined bedroom. The authorizing signature was Victoria Vance. Your mother paid a known violent felon $5,000 to break into your home. The entire room started to spin. My own mother. She did not just send Julian to change the locks at the restaurant. Julian was simply Plan B, a backup maneuver. Silas was Plan A. She hired a dangerous criminal to come into the place where my young daughter sleeps, to tear apart my room with a crowbar, to aggressively find the physical evidence of the offshore accounts and the property trust. But Silas clearly decided $5,000 was not nearly enough money for the risk. He found out exactly what was in those files. He realized he had massive leverage over a multimillionaire family, and he left that typed note to blackmail her for more. My mother's arrogant plan had spectacularly backfired, and my home, my sanctuary, was the collateral damage. Fear. That was exactly what Victoria wanted me to feel tonight. For 32 long years, she had ruled my existence with fear. Fear of her sharp disapproval, fear of her cutting me out of the family, fear of her manipulating my life behind the scenes. But as I stood there and looked at the face-down pictures of Lily on the dresser, the fear completely and totally evaporated. It vanished into thin air, leaving nothing but a massive void. What immediately replaced it was a cold, highly calculated, diamond-hard rage. I did not panic. I did not cry. I did not break down. I pulled my smartphone out of my pocket and I did 2 things. First, I searched the internet for a 24-hour emergency commercial locksmith. I did not want a standard residential lock. I ordered a heavy-duty, reinforced steel deadbolt system, the exact kind they use on bank vault back doors. Second, I opened my text messaging app and scrolled down to the contact labeled Mother. I did not write a long, emotional paragraph demanding answers. I did not express my hurt or my betrayal. I typed one single, terrifyingly calm sentence. Dinner. My place. Tomorrow at 7 p.m. Come alone. No games. I hit send. I knew with absolute certainty she would come. She was utterly desperate to know what Silas had done, and she was desperate to regain control over me. She thought she was going to walk into a broken apartment to intimidate a scared, crying little boy. She had no idea she was walking straight into an inescapable trap. The next 24 hours moved with the absolute terrifying precision of a ticking time bomb. I did not sleep a single minute that night. I spent the entire night wide awake on Chloe's small apartment couch, drinking black coffee and watching Lily sleep peacefully in the guest room. Every single time I closed my eyes, I saw that splintered door frame. I saw the forged signature on the trust documents. I saw my mother's smug, unbothered face at the high-end steakhouse. At exactly 8 a.m. the next morning, I stepped out onto Chloe's balcony and made the hardest, most dangerous phone call of my life. I called my Aunt Evelyn. Evelyn was my father's younger sister. Victoria had completely and ruthlessly excommunicated her from the Vance family over 10 years ago because Evelyn had dared to question exactly where my father's sudden massive influx of cash was coming from during the 2008 financial crisis. Evelyn lived in a small, modest house across town, living a quiet, peaceful life. She was the one person on this earth who knew exactly how dangerous and vindictive Victoria Vance really was. We agreed to meet at a quiet, run-down diner on the extreme outskirts of the city. Evelyn looked a bit older than the last time I saw her, her hair fully gray and tied back, but her eyes were still razor-sharp and deeply observant. I sat across from her in the sticky vinyl booth, a cold cup of cheap black coffee sitting between us, and I told her absolutely everything. I told her about the property trust, the offshore Cayman accounts, the forged signatures, the break-in, Silas the criminal, the $5,000 wire transfer. Evelyn did not look shocked. She did not gasp. She looked incredibly, profoundly sad. I always knew Richard was hiding money, she said slowly, wrapping her wrinkled hands around her warm coffee mug. But to use your social security number? To put your actual freedom in the federal crosshairs? That is entirely Victoria's doing. She has always viewed children as assets, Liam, not people. Assets to be utilized and discarded when necessary. I have the high-resolution pictures of the documents on my phone, I said, my voice low and steady. But I do not understand why now. Why are they suddenly so desperate to retrieve the physical files that they would hire a violent thug to break down my door? Evelyn leaned in closer across the table, dropping her voice to a harsh, secretive whisper. Because of Julian. Your golden, perfect brother is not doing as well as your mother constantly pretends. 3 months ago, Julian made a massive, catastrophic investment in a commercial real estate venture that went completely belly up. He is bankrupt, Liam. He owes millions of dollars to some very unforgiving private lenders. The kind of people who break legs. I stared at her, the final puzzle pieces violently and perfectly snapping together in my brain. Your parents are aggressively draining that offshore account, the one legally in your name, to secretly pay off Julian's massive debts. Evelyn continued, her eyes locked on mine. If the IRS or the SEC looks at Julian's sudden financial bailout, they will easily trace the money back to the Cayman account. And if they look at the Cayman account, they will come directly looking for the primary name on the ledger. Your mother was absolutely terrified you would find out and legally freeze the assets before Julian was entirely cleared. It was a triple betrayal. They were not just hiding illegal money. They were actively using my stolen identity to save the brother who had always treated me like dirt beneath his expensive shoes, and they were perfectly, happily willing to let me take the entire fall and go to federal prison for it. I thanked Evelyn, threw a $20 bill on the table to pay for the coffee, and left the diner. The rage inside my chest had completely crystallized. It was not hot, burning anger anymore. It was absolute zero. It was pure focus. By 2 p.m., I was back at my ruined apartment. The emergency commercial locksmith had just finished the installation. The new deadbolt was a massive, intimidating chunk of brushed steel. You could not kick it in with a police battering ram. The apartment was completely silent. I spent 2 full hours cleaning up the jagged wood splinters from the hallway. I vacuumed the cheap carpet until it was spotless. I went into my bedroom, picked up the 5 photographs of Lily, wiped the dust off the glass frames, and placed them perfectly upright on the dresser exactly where they belonged. This was my territory. This was my sanctuary. I was not going to be a victim in my own home ever again. At 6:30 p.m., I walked into the kitchen. I made sure the window blinds were pulled completely down. The ambient lighting in the apartment was dim, casting long, dramatic shadows across the hardwood floor. I took my smartphone out of my pocket. I checked the battery icon in the corner. 98%. I swiped open the screen, navigated to the Utilities folder, and tapped the Voice Memos app. I did not hide the phone under a newspaper or a magazine. I placed it right in the dead center of the granite kitchen island, screen facing straight up towards the ceiling. I hit the bright red record button. The small digital timer started ticking. 001, 002, 003. I walked over to the armchair in the living room, sat down in the semi-darkness, and waited. I was no longer the obedient, quiet son. I was no longer the constant disappointment. I was a structural architect, and I had just spent the entire day carefully designing the perfect, inescapable demolition of the Vance family empire. All I needed now was for the CEO to walk through the front door and strike the match. At exactly 6:59 p.m., the building intercom buzzed. It was a harsh, electric, grating sound that shattered the complete quiet of the apartment. I stood up slowly, smoothed out the wrinkles in my shirt, walked over to the panel, and pressed the release button without asking who it was. I knew. I heard the heavy, deliberate click of her expensive designer heels echoing up the concrete stairwell. She was not rushing. She was taking her time, projecting absolute power and dominance with every single step. I walked over to the door, turned the heavy new steel latch and pulled it wide open. Victoria Vance stood in my hallway. She was wearing a $1,000 black trench coat, carrying a pristine designer purse, and looking at my new heavy-duty lock with absolute, unfiltered disgust on her face. "Are you going to invite me in?" she sneered, her voice dripping with venom. "Or are we going to do this out in the hallway like commoners?" I took one slow step back, leaving the door wide open for her. "Come on in, Mom," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "We have a lot of accounting to do." Victoria Vance stepped over the threshold of my apartment as if she were stepping into a toxic biohazard zone. She did not take off her expensive Italian leather shoes. She did not offer a standard greeting or even acknowledge the fact that she was entering my personal sanctuary. She simply walked past me, bringing the heavy, suffocating scent of her signature expensive perfume into the small space, instantly overwhelming the faint, comforting smell of the cheap vanilla candle I had burning on the kitchen counter. I closed the heavy steel door behind her. The brand new commercial deadbolt clicked into place with a loud, absolute, and deeply satisfying finality. My mother walked slowly into the direct center of my modest living room. She ran a single, perfectly manicured finger over the back fabric of my second-hand sofa, checking for imaginary dust. She looked at the small flat-screen television, the simple wooden dining table, and the scattered colorful building blocks I had neatly stacked in the corner for Lily to play with. Her face contorted into a deeply practiced mask of pure, unfiltered pity and profound disgust. "I truly will never understand how you can tolerate living like this, Liam," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet, tense space. "You are a Vance. You have a university degree. You earn a respectable salary at that architectural firm, even if you stubbornly refuse to ask for the promotion you obviously deserve. Yet you actively choose to raise my granddaughter in a place that looks like a temporary transition home for the destitute. It is genuinely embarrassing to the family name." I leaned casually against the granite kitchen counter, crossing my arms firmly over my chest. I kept my eyes locked directly on her face. I did not take the bait. For my entire 32 years of life, she had consistently used my financial independence as a heavy weapon against me. She always framed my desire to live within my actual means, rather than relying on her toxic money, as a personal insult to her legacy. She wanted me dependent. She wanted me drowning in debt so she could swoop in and play the savior. "We are not here to discuss my interior decorating choices or my salary, Mom," I said smoothly, keeping my voice completely level. "We are here to discuss exactly why the Seattle Police Department had to process my shattered bedroom door for criminal fingerprints last night." Victoria let out a short, highly dismissive sigh. She unbuttoned her black designer trench coat but did not take it off, signaling she did not intend to stay long. She turned to face me, her posture rigidly straight, projecting the absolute, unquestionable authority she was so accustomed to wielding over my father, my brother, and the various charity boards she controlled. "You are making a massive, dramatic issue out of a very minor administrative misunderstanding," she said casually, waving her hand as if we were discussing a slightly delayed flight or a wrong order at a coffee shop. I hired a private contractor to retrieve some sensitive family documents from your apartment. The man was highly recommended to me by a discreet business associate. He was simply supposed to go in quietly, locate the specific files, and leave. I had absolutely no idea he was a violent criminal with a police record. I certainly did not instruct him to take a crowbar and damage your cheap wooden door. I stared at her, letting the sheer, unadulterated audacity of her statement hang in the heavy air between us. She was standing in the middle of my ruined home, openly admitting to orchestrating a targeted residential burglary, and casually framing it as a minor scheduling error. You hired a known, violent felon to break into my home, I repeated, dropping my voice an octave to convey the absolute seriousness of the situation. You paid him a $5,000 cash wire transfer to aggressively violate the exact space where your 5-year-old granddaughter sleeps every single night. Oh, please stop with the exhausting, dramatic victim narrative, Liam, she snapped, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling. Lily was not even here. You were safely at the restaurant cutting your ridiculous, cheap chocolate cake. No one was in any actual physical danger. The only real danger to this family right now is your complete and total lack of understanding regarding how corporate wealth management actually works in the real world. She took a confident step closer to the kitchen island. Her sharp eyes darted around the room, actively searching for the thick manila folder of documents. She did not notice the black smartphone lying completely flat on the dark granite surface, the small red recording icon silently blinking in the dim light. Those documents you found snooping in the attic, she continued, her tone shifting seamlessly to a sharp, patronizing lecturing cadence. The Commercial Real Estate Property Trust. The offshore bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. That is your future inheritance. Liam, your father and I have spent 3 incredibly stressful decades building a bulletproof financial fortress for this family. The commercial real estate market is highly volatile right now. Federal taxes are absolutely exorbitant. Your father simply utilized your name and your completely clean social security number to legally shelter a fraction of our hard-earned assets. It is standard operating practice for families in our specific tax bracket. Everyone does it. Standard practice? I asked, keeping my facial expression completely blank. Systematically forging my legal signature on federal tax documents is standard practice? Opening foreign bank accounts without my knowledge or consent to actively launder money is just basic wealth management. Victoria's jaw tightened visibly. The polished facade of the calm, collected wealthy matriarch was beginning to crack under the pressure, revealing the aggressive, cornered predator lurking just underneath the expensive makeup. We protected you from the very beginning, she raised her voice, pointing a sharp, manicured acrylic nail directly at my chest. You are so incredibly naive and ungrateful. You want to play the noble, struggling single father routine. You want to constantly reject our financial help and live in this damp box. But when Julian made a remarkably poor investment choice, when his massive commercial real estate venture completely collapsed last quarter and he desperately needed liquid capital to avoid total ruin, who do you think saved him? We did. We are actively using that offshore account to quietly settle Julian's massive debts, so he does not lose his house and his luxury cars. We are protecting the Vance family name from a humiliating public scandal. And you are actively jeopardizing all of it because you want to throw a childish, emotional tantrum over a forged signature on a piece of paper. Let me make sure I understand this perfectly, I said, making sure every single syllable was articulated clearly for the hidden microphone. You are aggressively draining an illegal offshore account with my legal name on it to pay off Julian's massive gambling and bad business debts. And when the IRS eventually audits that specific account, Julian walks away completely clean with his debts paid, and I go directly to a federal prison facility for massive tax evasion and fraud. You deliberately set me up to be the sacrificial lamb for the golden child. Victoria did not deny it. She did not look away. She did not look remotely guilty or ashamed of her actions. She just looked deeply annoyed that I was actually smart enough to figure out the exact mechanical details of her financial trap. You would never go to federal prison, she scoffed, waving her hand dismissively again. We have the absolute best corporate defense lawyers in the entire state on a massive retainer. We would happily pay whatever financial penalties or fines the government imposed to keep you out of a cell. But none of that hypothetical nonsense matters right now. The only thing that actually matters tonight is that you hand over the digital photographs you took of those files. I know for a fact you do not have the physical folder here. Silas tore your bedroom entirely apart and found absolutely nothing. So hand over your smartphone, Liam. Delete the digital backups in front of me. Do it right now, and we can all move past this deeply unfortunate evening and go back to our lives. I looked closely at the woman who gave birth to me. I searched her eyes for a single ounce of genuine maternal instinct. I looked for a microscopic shred of remorse or empathy for the immense pain she had caused. There was absolutely nothing there. Her eyes were completely dead, filled with nothing but cold, hard, financial calculation. No, I said. It was a very small word, but it echoed incredibly loudly in the quiet, tense kitchen. Victoria stopped moving entirely. She stood perfectly still, like a statue carved from ice. The silence in the room became incredibly dense, almost physically suffocating. My mother was not a woman who frequently heard the word no. She commanded large armies of corporate employees. She dictated harsh terms to prestigious charity boards. She ruled my passive father and my weak brother with absolute, unquestionable authority. "Excuse me?" she whispered, the toxic venom thick and heavy in her throat. "I am not giving you anything," I said, stepping confidently away from the counter, standing up to my full height to tower over her. "I am not deleting the photos from my phone. I am not helping you cover up your systemic, multimillion-dollar fraud. I am completely done playing the role of the Vance family scapegoat." Her face changed entirely in that exact moment. The mild annoyance vanished. The patronizing, lecturing tone completely disappeared. What replaced it was a look of pure, unadulterated, terrifying malice. She took 2 slow, deliberate steps toward me. Her cold eyes locked onto mine like a starving hawk staring down a vulnerable field mouse. "You really think you hold the winning cards in this situation, Liam?" she asked, her voice dropping into a terrifyingly calm, raspy register that sent a chill down my spine. "You genuinely think because you found a few pieces of paper in a dusty attic, you can suddenly dictate terms to me? Let me explain exactly how the next 6 agonizing months of your life are going to play out if you do not hand over that phone right this second." She paused for a long moment, ensuring she had my complete, undivided attention. I stood my ground, my heart hammering violently against my ribs, but I absolutely refused to break eye contact. "I had a very long conversation with Sarah this morning," Victoria said, a wicked smile playing on her lips. The sudden mention of my ex-wife's name felt like a physical, heavy blow to my ribs. I stiffened instinctively. "Yes?" Victoria smiled, a cold, predatory stretching of her facial features. "I called Sarah. She is doing quite well in her new life, actually. Did you know she misses Lily terribly? I told Sarah that I strongly believe you are currently having a severe, untreated mental breakdown. I told her you are acting dangerously paranoid, that you are making up wild, unfounded conspiracy theories about our family's finances, and that your current living conditions in this awful apartment are completely unsafe for a young child." I gripped the hard edge of the granite kitchen counter until my knuckles turned completely white. She was actually going after my daughter. "Sarah does not have the money or the energy to fight me for full custody," I said, my voice thick with rapidly rising, uncontrollable anger. "No, she absolutely does not," Victoria agreed smoothly, her eyes gleaming with dark triumph. "But I do. I have unlimited financial resources, Liam. If you do not give me exactly what I want tonight, I will personally fund the most vicious, relentless, and publicly humiliating custody lawsuit this state has ever witnessed in its history. I will hire an entire team of ruthless lawyers to absolutely bury you in legal paperwork and court appearances. I will force you to drain every single penny you have saved in Lily's college fund just to pay your own defense attorneys. I will drag your professional reputation through the mud at your architectural firm. I will have highly paid psychologists testify under oath that you are mentally unfit to parent. And when you are completely bankrupt, exhausted, and broken, Sarah will easily take Lily away to another state, and you will never see your beautiful daughter again. She took one final, aggressive step forward, stopping just inches from my face, her expensive perfume choking the air out of my lungs. "So," she whispered, her eyes burning with the absolute certainty of victory, "are you going to hand over the evidence right now? Or are you going to lose your daughter forever?" I thought the absolute worst part of my life was over. I was so incredibly wrong. I stood perfectly still in the center of the kitchen, letting her monstrous threat hang heavy and toxic in the air between us. The threat to take my child away was the ultimate nuclear weapon in my mother's extensive arsenal of manipulation. She had brutally used that exact same tactic to completely break Sarah's spirit during the darkest days of our divorce proceedings. She had used similar financial threats to force Julian into absolute compliance regarding his career choices. She firmly, deeply believed that every single human being on Earth had a breaking point, and she was absolutely certain she had just found mine. I looked slowly down at the hardwood floor, deliberately letting my shoulders slump just a fraction of an inch. I needed her to completely believe she had won the war. I needed her to feel the absolute, dizzying peak of her arrogant, untouchable superiority before I tore it all down. "You would really do that to your own blood?" I asked, keeping my voice intentionally quiet, sounding almost entirely broken and defeated. "You would intentionally destroy your own son's life and deeply traumatize your own granddaughter just to protect your illegal money and your social standing?" Victoria let out a short, sharp, highly triumphant laugh. It was the ugliest, most soulless sound I had ever heard in my entire life. "Grow up and face reality, Liam," she sneered, turning her back on me with complete dismissal to pick up her expensive designer purse from the kitchen island. "This world runs strictly on power, money, and leverage. You possess absolutely none of those things. I am actively protecting the long-term legacy of this family. If you unfortunately become collateral damage in that necessary process, so be it. Now, unlock your smartphone and hand it to me immediately so I can go home." She reached her hand out toward me, her palm facing up, waiting expectantly for my absolute, unconditional submission. I did not move my hands. I did not reach into my pockets. I slowly, deliberately lifted my head, and I let the carefully constructed facade of the scared, broken, obedient son completely drop away. I looked directly into her eyes with a coldness and a hardness I did not even know I possessed. "I do not have my phone in my pocket, Mom," I said, my voice suddenly sharp, steady, and crystal clear. Victoria frowned, her hand still outstretched in the empty space between us. "What on earth are you talking about? Give it to me." I nodded my head slightly toward the dark granite kitchen island, right next to where her expensive purse was resting. "My phone is right there. It has been sitting right there on the counter since long before you even walked through the front door." Victoria looked slowly down. She saw the sleek black rectangular device sitting flat on the stone surface. Then her eyes focused. She saw the bright, glaring red circle illuminated on the active screen. She saw the digital audio timer steadily and relentlessly ticking upward. 2400 hours 15, 2400 hours 16, 2400 hours 17. Her outstretched hand froze completely in midair. The blood violently and rapidly drained from her face, leaving her looking pale, hollow, and suddenly sickly under the dim overhead kitchen lights. The absolute realization of what she was looking at hit her like a high-speed, unstoppable freight train. "You have been recording this entire conversation?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The towering arrogance completely vanished, replaced instantly by raw, unfiltered, suffocating panic. "Every single miserable word," I confirmed, taking a slow, highly deliberate step toward her, claiming my space. "I recorded your full, unprompted admission to hiring a violent felon to break into my private home. I recorded your highly detailed explanation of exactly how Dad systematically forged my signature to create a fraudulent commercial real estate property trust to evade federal taxes. I recorded your explicit admission that you are currently using illegal offshore funds to pay off Julian's massive private debts. And most importantly of all, I recorded your explicit, detailed, and completely unhinged threat to fund a fraudulent custody lawsuit to extort me into silence. Victoria lunged violently for the phone. Her sharp, manicured hands clawed desperately at the granite counter, completely frantic to grab the device and physically smash it into pieces on the floor. But I was significantly faster. I snatched the phone smoothly off the island, took 3 large, quick steps backward out of her reach, and immediately hit the stop button on the screen. The high-quality audio file saved instantly and automatically to a secure, encrypted cloud server that she could never, ever reach. "Delete that recording right now," Victoria screamed at the top of her lungs. The carefully crafted, elegant mask of the wealthy Seattle socialite was completely and permanently gone. She looked exactly like a feral, cornered, desperate animal. Her perfectly styled hair was slightly out of place. Her eyes were wide, manic, and darting wildly around the room. "If you show that audio file to anyone, I swear to God, Liam, I will absolutely ruin your life." I laughed. It was a cold, hard, completely humorless sound that surprised even me. "You cannot ruin me, Mom," I said, gripping the phone tightly in my right hand, feeling the solid weight of my victory. "Because you are already way too late." She stopped screaming instantly. Her chest heaved heavily as she struggled to pull air into her lungs. "What do you mean I am too late?" This was the moment. This was the exact, beautiful moment I had been meticulously planning since I sat shaking in my car outside the police station earlier that afternoon. "You honestly thought I spent my entire day today crying on my couch in fear?" I asked, my voice completely devoid of any remaining sympathy or familial warmth. "You really thought I was just sitting here waiting for you, terrified of what your hired thug Silas had done to my door? I did not stay here. At exactly 9 o'clock this morning, right after I met with Aunt Evelyn to get the full, pathetic story about Julian's secret bankruptcy, I drove directly to the downtown police precinct." Victoria took a stumbling, uncoordinated step backward, her back hitting the cold edge of the stainless steel refrigerator. "I did not just have digital photos on my phone, Mom," I revealed, delivering the final, fatal, crushing blow to her entire fabricated reality. "When I was up in your hot attic a month ago, I did not just take quick pictures with my camera. I took the original physical documents. I took the forged property deeds. I took the original Cayman Island bank statements. I took the incorporation paperwork with Dad's fake signatures all over them. I walked out of your house with them hidden under my jacket, and I locked them safely in a private safety deposit box at my local bank." Her mouth opened wide, but absolutely no sound came out. She was physically hyperventilating, her hands shaking uncontrollably at her sides. "And at exactly 10 o'clock this morning," I continued relentlessly, driving the nail deeper into the coffin, "I sat down in a small, windowless interrogation room with Detective Miller from the Financial Crimes Unit, and I handed him the entire physical folder. I gave the authorities absolutely everything. The police already have the undeniable, physical proof of the massive tax fraud. They already have the irrefutable proof of the identity theft. They already have the bank records of the wire transfer proving you paid Silas $5,000. And as soon as you walk your expensive shoes out of my apartment, I am emailing this exact audio recording directly to the district attorney's office to officially add witness tampering, severe extortion, and conspiracy to commit residential burglary to your growing federal indictment." Victoria Vance, the formerly untouchable matriarch, the deeply terrifying woman who had successfully terrorized my entire existence for over 3 decades, slowly slid down the front of the stainless steel refrigerator. Her legs completely gave out beneath her. She collapsed onto my cheap hardwood floor in a heap, her expensive black designer coat bunching up awkwardly around her waist. "Liam, please," she begged, looking up at me from the floor. Her voice was incredibly weak, trembling violently, completely and utterly shattered. It was the very first time in my entire 32 years on this earth I had ever heard my mother beg for anything. Please, you are my son. We are a family. You cannot send your own father to a federal prison. You cannot do this to Julian. They will seize the estate. They will take the cars. They will take absolutely everything we have spent our lives building. You did this to yourselves, I said, looking down at her crumpled form without a single microscopic ounce of pity or regret. You actively used my name to build a fragile criminal empire. You sent a violent, dangerous thug to my private home. You threatened to take my innocent daughter away from me using a fake lawsuit. You made your deliberate choices. Now you get to live with the devastating consequences. I turned my back on her, walked over to the heavy steel front door, turned the deadbolt, and pulled it wide open. The cool, refreshing hallway air rushed immediately into the stale apartment. Get out of my house, I commanded, my voice echoing loudly and firmly in the empty corridor. Victoria slowly, painfully pulled herself up from the floor. She looked incredibly old in that moment. The imposing power and the terrifying, commanding aura she usually carried had completely evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, pathetic shell of a woman. She grabbed her purse from the counter with violently shaking hands and walked slowly, unsteadily toward the open door. She stopped right on the threshold, turning her head to look back at me one last, final time. Her eyes were completely filled with a highly toxic mixture of absolute hatred and profound, inescapable defeat. You are going to regret doing this for the rest of your miserable, pathetic life, she spat, her voice trembling with impotent rage. No, I replied smoothly, staring right through her as if she were already a ghost. For the absolute first time in my entire life, I am not going to regret a single thing. I slammed the heavy steel door directly in her face. The deadbolt clicked shut with a loud, satisfying, echoing crack. The apartment instantly fell into a deep, beautiful, incredibly peaceful silence. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far. You're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The legal and social fallout of my actions was incredibly swift, deeply brutal, and highly public. The very next morning, exactly as I had promised her, I attached the clear audio recording to a secure email and sent it directly to Detective Miller and the district attorney's office. Less than 48 hours after that email was sent, a massive fleet of unmarked, black government SUVs pulled up abruptly to the massive iron security gates of the Vance family estate in the wealthy, exclusive suburbs. Heavily armed federal agents from the IRS, working in tight conjunction with the local Seattle Police Department, executed a massive, no-knock search and seizure warrant. I did not drive over to the suburbs to watch it happen in person. I did not need to see it with my own eyes. I saw it plastered all over the evening news broadcasts. The bold, breaking news headline on the local television station read, "Prominent Seattle wealth management family indicted in multimillion-dollar federal tax fraud and extortion plot." The news anchors repeatedly showed dramatic aerial helicopter footage of federal agents in tactical gear carrying dozens of cardboard bankers' boxes, computer hard drives, and financial ledgers out of the front doors of my parents' sprawling mansion. They showed a brief, highly humiliating video clip of my father, Richard Vance, being physically led out of his prestigious corporate office building in polished silver handcuffs, his head ducked deeply down in a desperate attempt to avoid the aggressive flashing cameras of the local paparazzi. My smartphone started blowing up almost immediately. The text notifications and missed call alerts were coming in so incredibly fast the device was practically vibrating itself right off my kitchen counter. The very first text message I received was, predictably, from Julian. "You absolute piece of garbage. You ruined us. You ruined absolutely everything we had. Dad's bank accounts are entirely frozen by the feds. The private lenders are aggressively calling in my massive loans. The bank just initiated foreclosure on my house. They are taking my cars. I am going to lose absolutely everything. I hope you burn in hell for what you deliberately did to your own family." I stood in my kitchen and read the frantic, furious text message, while calmly making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for Lily's school lunch. I read the words and I waited to feel bad. I waited to feel that familiar, conditioned familial guilt that had plagued my entire existence. But I did not feel a single pang of guilt. I felt nothing but a profound sense of justice. Julian was finally, for the first time in his pampered 35 years of life, facing the severe, unshielded consequences of his own reckless, entitled behavior. Without our parents' illegal, hidden money to constantly bail him out of his massive failures, he was completely exposed to the harsh, unforgiving reality of the real world. I tapped the screen, blocked his phone number permanently, and deleted the message thread without typing a single word in response. The following weeks and months felt exactly like watching the slow, meticulous, and highly public funeral of the entire Vance family name. The wealthy socialites and fake friends who used to kiss my mother's cheek at extravagant charity galas suddenly, aggressively pretended they had never even met her. Their exclusive country club immediately and publicly revoked their membership. My father's highly prestigious investment firm convened an emergency board meeting and forced him to officially resign in total disgrace in a desperate attempt to protect their own corporate liability and public image. Their entire glamorous world, a world built entirely on fake appearances, manipulation, and stolen money, collapsed completely like a fragile house of cards caught in a Category 5 hurricane. Because I had proactively gone to the authorities, willingly handed over the original physical evidence, and provided the undeniable, crystal-clear audio recording of the terrifying extortion attempt, the district attorney granted me full, unconditional legal immunity. I was officially and permanently classified in the federal system as a victim of identity theft. My legal name was completely scrubbed from the fraudulent offshore accounts and the toxic commercial real estate property trusts. My personal credit score was highly protected. The terrifying, looming threat of federal prison that had been hanging heavily over my head for a month was entirely erased. As for my mother's incredibly vile threat to fund a fraudulent custody lawsuit against me, it completely evaporated into thin air. With all of her financial assets frozen solid by the federal government, and actively facing multiple serious felony indictments that could put her away for a decade, Victoria could barely afford to pay the massive retainer for her own criminal defense lawyers, let alone fund a frivolous, expensive lawsuit to try and steal my daughter. I called Sarah the week the news officially broke on television. I briefly, calmly explained the severity of the situation. Sarah was deeply shocked, but mostly, she was incredibly relieved that she was completely insulated from the massive legal fallout. She had moved on with her life, and she had absolutely no intention of ever participating in Victoria's sick, manipulative games again. The complex legal proceedings took several exhausting, highly stressful months to fully resolve in the court system. My parents' high-priced defense lawyers desperately tried to negotiate a quiet settlement, but the physical and audio evidence I provided was utterly, undeniably airtight. They had absolutely nowhere left to run. In the very end, entirely out of money and out of options, they accepted a harsh plea deal to avoid a lengthy, deeply humiliating public trial that would have exposed even more of their dirty secrets. My father, Richard Vance, the man who had coldly forged his own son's signature to steal millions of dollars, was formally sentenced to 2 full years in a low-security federal prison facility. My mother, Victoria Vance, the cruel architect of the entire nightmare, faced the absolute most severe consequences. Because of the direct wire transfer to Silas, the conspiracy to commit residential burglary, and the damning audio recording of her explicit extortion attempt regarding my child, she was completely backed into a legal corner. She narrowly avoided actual prison time due to her advanced age and lack of prior criminal history, but the federal judge was absolutely merciless. She was sentenced to 5 years of incredibly strict federal probation. She was ordered by the court to pay massive, crippling financial fines that completely decimated what little remained of their legally acquired wealth. But the absolute most satisfying part of the judge's final ruling was the permanent restraining order. The court legally barred Victoria Vance from ever coming within 500 feet of myself, my home, my workplace, or my daughter, Lily. If she even attempted to send a text message, make a phone call, or drive her car past my apartment building, she would immediately violate her strict probation and go straight to a federal prison cell. She was legally, permanently erased from our lives. At my architectural firm, the rumors briefly circulated around the water cooler, but my boss called me directly into his private office to offer his full, unwavering support. The massive, exhausting distraction of my toxic family was finally gone, and my professional work output dramatically increased. 6 months after the high-profile arrests, I was offered a massive promotion to senior lead architect. My annual salary doubled. I did not need their illegal offshore money. I had earned my own success with my own 2 hands. 6 months later, the brutal, endlessly gray Seattle winter had finally faded away, giving way to a bright, incredibly crisp spring morning. The heavy, oppressive clouds that usually hung low over the city skyline had completely broken apart, allowing warm, golden sunlight to flood generously through the large windows of my apartment. I was standing comfortably in my kitchen, pouring a hot cup of fresh coffee, listening to the absolute best sound in the entire world. The sweet, innocent sound of my daughter happily singing to herself in the living room while she played with her toys. Earlier that afternoon, I had taken Lily to her pediatric dentist appointment. It was just a routine checkup, but she had been incredibly nervous about going. She held my hand tight the entire time we sat in the waiting room, squeezing my fingers hard when the dentist leaned in with the small metal mirror. But she did not cry. She did not panic. She sat perfectly still in the big chair and let the dentist do his job. When the appointment was finally over, the smiling dental assistant handed her a small sheet of colorful stickers. Lily proudly, carefully peeled off a shiny, holographic gold star and stuck it directly onto the exact center of her pink shirt. "Look, Daddy!" she had yelled, running excitedly out into the waiting room, her face beaming with pure, unfiltered pride. "I got a gold star for being incredibly brave today." I had scooped her up into my arms right there in the lobby, hugging her tightly against my chest, breathing in the sweet smell of strawberry toothpaste and innocent childhood. "You are the bravest girl in the whole wide world, Lily," I had whispered softly into her hair, and as I held her tight, I realized with a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion that I had finally earned my own invisible gold star. I had faced down the terrifying monsters in my own family, and I had successfully, permanently protected her sanctuary. That evening, I hosted a small, intimate dinner party at my apartment. It was not a lavish, pretentious, high-stress affair at an overpriced downtown steakhouse. It was just real, genuine people, real chosen family. Chloe came over after her shift ended, bringing a massive bowl of delicious homemade pasta and a cheap, wonderful bottle of red wine. My Aunt Evelyn drove all the way in from the suburbs, carrying a fresh, warm apple pie she had baked that morning. We sat comfortably around my small wooden dining table, the apartment filled completely with the incredible smell of garlic, baked apples, and genuine, unforced laughter. There were no hushed, toxic whispers across the table. There were no hidden, malicious agendas. There was no one secretly judging the quality of the silverware or the brand name of the wine. Lily was sitting happily at the table, eating her pasta and telling Aunt Evelyn a highly exaggerated, endlessly rambling story about a funny squirrel she had seen at the park that week. Chloe raised her wine glass, tapping it gently with her metal fork to get our attention over the noise. "I want to make a quick toast," Chloe said, her eyes shining with genuine warmth and pride as she looked across the table directly at me. "To Liam, for navigating the absolute worst, most terrifying storm imaginable, and coming out the other side as a completely free, incredibly strong man. To peace, to quiet, and to chosen family." "To chosen family," Aunt Evelyn echoed softly, raising her water glass with a deep, knowing smile. I raised my own glass. I looked closely at the incredible, supportive people sitting in my home. I looked at my beautiful daughter, perfectly safe, perfectly happy, and completely oblivious to the intense darkness we had so narrowly escaped. The word freedom felt absolutely massive in my chest. It was freedom from the endless psychological manipulation. Freedom from the constant, suffocating fear of my mother's sharp disapproval. Freedom from the incredibly toxic, heavy burden of the Vance family name. To drawing a hard, permanent line, I added softly, my voice filled with deep conviction, clinking my glass gently against Chloe's. And to never, ever apologizing for protecting the people you love. Later that night, after the guests had gone home and Lily was fast asleep in her warm bed, I walked quietly into my bedroom. The heavy steel deadbolt on the front door was locked tight, but I no longer felt like I was living inside a tense, defensive fortress. I just felt safe. I opened the bottom drawer of my wooden dresser. Tucked carefully beneath a thick stack of old winter sweaters was one final, physical piece of paper. It was a single photocopy of the original fraudulent property trust document. I had kept it hidden during the entire federal investigation just in case I ever needed to quickly reference the exact offshore account numbers. It was a small insurance policy against my own lingering, conditioned paranoia. I pulled the piece of paper out into the light. I looked closely at the forged signature at the very bottom of the page. The sharp, aggressive L. The harsh, downward V. I looked at the physical manifestation of the massive lie that had almost destroyed my entire life. I realized, standing there in the quiet room, that I did not feel angry anymore. I did not feel scared or intimidated. I just felt completely, wonderfully empty regarding my parents. They were absolute strangers to me now. They were nothing more than toxic relics of a past life that I had successfully, permanently burned to the ground. I walked slowly into the kitchen, holding the paper loosely in my hand. I walked over to the small mechanical paper shredder I kept plugged in next to my small desk. I reached out and turned the machine on. The sharp metal blades hummed to life with a low buzz. I fed the fraudulent document directly into the top slot. I watched with immense satisfaction as the sharp steel gears grabbed the paper, pulling it aggressively down, shredding the forged signature and the fake, toxic legacy into hundreds of tiny, completely unrecognizable ribbons of white confetti. I turned the machine off. The beautiful silence returned to the apartment. I walked over to the large window in the living room and looked out at the quiet city streets. The streetlights were glowing softly in the dark, illuminating the peaceful neighborhood. I realized then, with absolute clarity, that I was no longer an extension of Richard and Victoria Vance. I was not the disappointing, difficult son. I was the exact point in the family timeline where the generational trauma finally, permanently stopped. I was the sturdy, unshakable foundation upon which Lily would build her own beautiful, honest, and completely authentic life. I had taken the absolute worst they had to offer, and I had used it to build a completely impenetrable wall around my daughter. I took a deep, slow breath, the clean, cool air filling my lungs, and for the absolute first time in my 32 years of life, my world felt entirely clean. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to draw a permanent, painful line in the sand to protect your own peace and the safety of your children? Sometimes the most toxic elements in our lives share our own blood, and walking away is the most courageous thing a parent can do. Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey.